Hello, Oxford. Welcome back to another episode of The Running Commode. I'm Mark Raymond, your friendly neighborhood property manager, and I'm with
Erik Hodge, your friendly neighborhood home inspector.
And The Running Commode is a 15-minute monthly show designed to give you helpful tips and tricks in the management and running of your home. And today is episode 2, bringing us to a grand total of 2. And we have a special guest today, too, and I'm really thrilled about this.
Yes.
How was your Memorial Day, by the way?
You know, it's Michigan, so you think the kickoff to summer wasn't quite there, but it was still a good weekend.
Do any landscaping around the house?
No, because Michigan weather, as you know, as always. But that's normally the plan.
Yeah.
Getting the gardens in, getting the yard looking nice and spiffy.
Absolutely, and we've got a guy that's really going to help us in this regard. Interesting tidbit about this gentleman. He developed, and I'm reading this here, he worked on the world's largest privately owned water feature in a place called Namibia, Africa, a game reserve there, and he used the largest rocks ever for this type of a feature.
I mean, we are the gravel capital of the world, Mark.
Yeah, these are 200,000 pound rocks, so I don't think they came from here. But I digress. He came back from Namibia, Africa to work on Hannah's Garden, which is just steps here from the studio, a beautiful sanctuary to honor Hannah St. Julian, who, this is just an amazing tribute to her and her spirit. We're really happy the way this is turning out. So without any further ado, I'd like to bring up to the desk Kurt Pieper from Verdant Landscape Consulting. Thank you so much for coming out here.
Guys.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming, man.
Thanks for having me.
Glad you're here. And, as a property manager, I would like to lead into this just by talking about landscaping in the sense of rental housing. That's where I live, and not in a rental house per se, but I live on these properties, and it's interesting that the landlords neglect sometimes the landscaping, and sometimes their tenant residents neglect the landscaping. It seems like it's the last thing that's really thought about in this context. And so, I really appreciate a good landscaper, and it's good to have you here to consult on that matter.
Thank you.
Erik, anything that you wanted to share as a home inspector?
Yeah, I mean, copying off of you there, when I pull up to a house and, obviously curb appeal is like so key. When I see a house that people have spent time and dedicated to making it look good, whether they did it or they had a professional come in, it just makes a world of difference, I think, not only in property value, but just in the overall aesthetics, which I know what you do, because you're hardscapes, but also water features, it kind of sometimes takes it even to another level.
Right.
And, I mean, when you see a house like that, like they don't last in the market very long, that's for sure, especially when you got a pro like you coming out and taking care of it. But I have to imagine, do people even realize how the value that can bring to their house?
I don't think most people do realize what a good return. You always hear about kitchens or baths or things like that when it comes to home improvements or redos, and not a lot of people talk about the landscape. But Mark, you probably know. I know. In the real estate market, they know that 90% return on the outdoor stuff. What we've seen in some cases, again for the right buyers, that on water it can be over 100%. So you can actually be a positive return. Depends on how high of a price tag we put on it when we build it.
If the sky's the limit.
Yeah. But
so in the landlord-tenant space, nobody thinks about landscape.
No.
But in the home ownership, no one thinks about water.
Right, because it always seems to be either not thought of at all or the last thing, and it's like people treat it as though, well, if we had money left over when we're done doing things, after we get our fire pit, after we get our outdoor kitchen, all these other things. And I anytime I talk to somebody about that, I tell them that is completely backwards. You should be thinking about water first with some certain, no matter what your budget is. Start with 20% of it should go to water. There's no dollar that you spend, and I say it all the time, people get tired of hearing it from me, but there's no dollar that you spend on your landscape outside that pays you back like one spent on a water feature, on water.
Why do you think
Well-
we're
well done.
obsessed, I guess obsessed in a good way, with water? Why such a good return on it?
It's, well, one, it's in our genes. We're genetically hardwired to seek it out, just like we are to seek out green space, verdant, right? That was, I mean, really, that was kind of the, you know, the inspiration for the original name, and to a greater extent, there's a book out there. It's called Blue Mind. It was written, I don't know, 20 years ago now, and it talks about the science behind why we seek out water. Why, you know, we all want the house on the lake or on the waterfront, or we want a weekend cabin there, and it's because on an instinctive level, we know that water is life. I always say life is water, right? Everybody uses the saying water is life. I say life is water. It's, you know, we're 80% water or whatever. So that's, you know, that's what drives that.
Okay, I want to wrap this up before we go to the break. Water obviously is as you say, what the water feature in a home, is there a site that can't support a water feature?
No.
Ever? No.
Not hard, no. I mean, we have we have everything from a 12-inch little patio bowl that you could have on a small little cocktail table outside on your bed, up to, I mean,
All right.
our Africa project.
And we're going to talk some more about that right
Yeah.
after the break. Thank you so much for your time and attention to this. Kurt Pieper with Verdant Landscape Consulting. We'll be back right after this. And we're back with Kurt Pieper of Verdant Landscape Consulting. I did a little bit of misnomer on his name, but interestingly enough, Kurt corrected me at the break. And actually, it could be said both ways, correctly?
You pronounced it correctly based on its Dutch-German origin.
Okay, but don't do
Just
that
us-
again.
yeah. All of us here in America don't like to be called
Piper.
Don't like to be called peepers. Yes.
So in formulating my thoughts at the break, is there any kind of a site where you couldn't do a water feature in a home?
Not of some. I mean, there's always something we can do. Like I say, everything from it could be a self-contained patio bowl. To, the next step up would be, you know, sculpture-sized fountain scape that you know can fit in a basically a 4x4 area, 16 square feet. Almost any homeowner has space for something like that. If you just had an apartment, you could have one of those patio bowls, because we have them in everything from 12 inches on up to 60 inches. You could have it on a balcony or a deck.
Yeah. So if somebody declared, oh, that's for rich people, that's wrong.
Yeah, no, it's not. And again, I would argue rich is subjective, and the benefits that you get from being around that water pays for itself. It pays for itself directly to as far as your own enjoyment goes, but also then, if we're talking about selling properties, on the back end too.
But you brought up a good, interesting point there, is having that water feature on a balcony as an apartment owner. Like, because you say all these people want to have, you know, their fire pits and stuff, which are awesome, or their backyard barbecues and stuff, and you can't do that when you have an apartment.
Right.
But you can do a water feature.
Sure.
And there's no violation of the apartment
Right.
rules and stuff like that.
Low wattage, you know, the requirements, not a ton of splashing water, and if you want to put some goldfish in there, you can.
It's just connections back to that whole, just how we're like ingrained, and you
Yes.
said it's in our
Yes,
genes
it
about
satisfies
the
it.
water.
And you're sitting there now a few inches away from these negative ions that are being generated by that moving water, which are healthful. They're good for your mental health. They're good for your physical
I
health.
mean, how many people have those sound machines for waves? It's like water is such an integral part of our
Right.
life. So
That soothes your mind because because it tricks your mind into thinking that you buy water.
Yeah.
Right. But the negative ions are actually having a physical effect on you.
So not to be negative, see what I did there, but
The one time when negative is a positive. Yeah.
But what about the liability or safety aspects of putting a water feature?
Really, there has been almost no pushback on anything like that.
Okay.
On some of the deeper features, typically, a lot of ponds that go in are 2 feet or less deep. When that's a concern, we can go pondless. We can go to a fountainscape, and you still get all that action and that sound and everything of water without any standing water. If it's a safety issue in that way.
But if it's a large feature,
When it's a larger feature or a deeper feature, sometimes people err on the side of caution, even though there's not really regulations pertaining to it oftentimes. But they'll treat it as though it's a pool.
okay.
So or some municipalities will treat it as though it's a pool.
So do you do like a
and it just has to have a fence around it.
Okay.
Just like a pool would. Or the yard itself has to have a fence around it.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask, if you could just the yard, or does it have to be like around the actual water feature?
No,
which
it
kind
can,
of takes away
no,
from the
if
feature
it's
itself.
if it's inside of a fenced yard, then in those situations, most places, almost everywhere we go. We live in Oxford. I live in Lake Orion. We've got whatever it is, 46 lakes in Lake Orion, something like that. Open water is everywhere.
Yeah.
So in places like that, no one's uptight about open water because it's everywhere and it's just a fact of life, and you have to watch
A 2-inch pond or a 40-foot deep lake.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
What about the maintenance side of the equation?
the systems that we do, again, I'm a certified aquascape contractor, and those aquascape systems are extremely low maintenance. So some of they are
It's extremely low.
5 minutes a week
Oh,
Okay.
to 15
Yes, okay.
to 15 max.
Yes.
And that's if you have, I mean, you might spend 15 minutes during during autumn.
Fall and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, where you're having to empty that skimmer basket a few more times, or clear out a intake bay, depending on.
So that still
how we
does have a
treat that.
filtration system like a pool.
Yes,
keep
we're mimicking nature. We're recreating an ecosystem inside that pond. We're not using chemicals. We're not 9 times out of 10, we're not even using anything like UV light or anything like that. It is straight nature based. And even though it's a pond, the interesting thing is it's more akin to a river system.
Because of
The constant movement of the
Yeah.
water, and it's constantly flowing past this beneficial bacteria that's digesting and consuming the nutrients out of the water and keeping it clear and algae free.
Not only just a water system, it's like its own ecosystem you're
Yes,
putting into the
and that is Aquascape's thing, ecosystem ponds. Pioneered it, brought it to the mainstream 30 years ago now.
But you can also, if you wanted to have a fire pit.
Oh yeah,
as well too.
And we do all sorts of crossover stuff, fire and water.
That's very interesting, and I'm glad that you handle that because I know that stuff is not light at all. So I'm sure there's a bunch of big guys like you moving stuff around.
Yeah, and
special
machines.
equipment. Yeah,
And machines.
well, we got about 45 seconds left, believe it or not. Time flies when you're having fun. What do you say the number one regret of people that have a water feature finally installed is?
Most of them, once they've had it, is that they didn't go bigger.
Indeed.
Within a year, they're calling back saying, we'd like to go bigger.
just like when you get
Kurt,
a shed.
thank you very much. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks, Kurt.
So
Appreciate it.
if your idea of a water feature right now is a bathtub, expand those horizons and reach out to Kurt Pieper to do that.
Or
we're gonna
Pieper.
put his
I'll
He'll
respond to
answer
both.
either way.
That's right. So we'll put that information up for you to see. And thank you so much for your time and attention, for watching us here at the Running Commode. Any last closing thoughts, Erik?
I just want to say thanks again for coming on out, and I'm glad
pleasure.
the weather is changing. I'm sure we're going to be seeing you out there installing some awesome water features.
That's about the only place you'll be seeing me for the next few months.
Which is good, and I appreciate all you guys for tuning in and joining us today.
And we'll see you again next month.